A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
I was looking at the news yesterday morning, and the World Meteorological Organization dropped their latest State of the Global Climate Report. It is not exactly light reading for a Monday morning. They confirmed that the period from 2015 to 2025 was officially the hottest 11-year span ever recorded. But it is not just the temperature of the air that is the problem. The energy imbalance they are describing is absolutely mind-boggling. The report highlights that Earth's oceans are currently absorbing heat at a rate equivalent to 18 times our total annual human energy use. It feels like the planet is running a high-grade fever that just won't break, and we are the ones standing over the thermostat with our eyes closed.
It is a staggering data point, Herman, and it really underscores the urgency of where we find ourselves on this 24th of March, 2026. My name is Corn Pubbleberry, and I've been diving into the technical annex of that report all night. When you look at the planetary boundaries framework that Johann Rockström and his team at the Potsdam Institute have been tracking, the news gets even more sobering. Late last year, ocean acidification was confirmed as the seventh boundary to cross out of the safe operating space and into the danger zone. Out of 9 critical systems that keep Earth stable, we have now breached 7. We are effectively operating a high-performance vehicle at top speed, while 7 of the 9 dashboard lights are flashing bright red.
That is a vivid image, Corn, though I am not sure I want to be in that car. It feels like we are in the passenger seat and the driver is arguing about whether the red lights are actually a shade of deep orange. Today's prompt from Daniel is about a hypothetical way to fix that dashboard. He is giving us a magic wand, but with a very specific, very heavy limitation. We cannot use it to fix things that are just inefficient or slightly broken or redeemable through better policy. We have to use it to permanently eliminate the 10 most fundamentally, inherently unsustainable practices in modern civilization. Practices that are structural dead ends. Daniel wants us to rank them by priority, keeping in mind that sustainability also includes the full expression of the human condition. It is not just about carbon, it is about us.
I love the framing of this thought experiment. It forces us to distinguish between what is merely a bad habit and what is an architectural flaw in the way we have built the modern world. If we are aiming for long-term human prosperity and survival, we have to look at the systems that cannot be optimized into safety. Some things are just incompatible with a finite planet and a flourishing society. We are talking about the difference between a leaky faucet and a foundation made of salt. You can't just efficient your way out of a foundation that dissolves when it rains.
Let's set the ground rules for this wand. If we wave it, the practice doesn't just get a little better, it vanishes. It becomes impossible to perform. The world has to restructure itself around its absence. It is a structural pivot, a controlled demolition of the old to make room for the new. So, where do we start? What is at the top of the list for you? What is the biggest salt foundation we are standing on?
For me, the number one priority, the foundational unsustainable practice that underpins almost everything else, is the infinite growth economic model. We have built a global financial system that requires perpetual exponential growth in gross domestic product just to maintain basic stability. But we live on a planet with physical limits. As we discussed back in episode 8522, you cannot have infinite expansion on a finite substrate. It is the logic of a cancer cell. If the economy stops growing, the system collapses into recession or depression. If it keeps growing, it consumes the very biosphere that supports it. It is a suicide pact written in spreadsheets.
I knew you would go for the macroeconomics first. It is the ultimate donkey move, looking at the whole field instead of the individual carrots. But you are right. If the system is designed to fail if it doesn't grow, and the planet is designed to fail if the system keeps growing, we have an irreconcilable conflict. Most people think of gross domestic product as a measure of health, but it is a blind metric. It doesn't distinguish between a forest standing and providing oxygen and a forest being clear cut and sold for timber. Both can contribute to growth, but only one is sustainable. The World Inequality Report 2026, which came out last December, really highlighted the absurdity of this. The top 0.001% of the population, about 60,000 individuals, now owns 3 times more wealth than the bottom half of humanity combined. We are growing the pie, but we are burning the kitchen to do it, and most people aren't even getting a slice.
And the second order effects of that growth mandate are what drive the other 9 items on our list. If we waved the wand and replaced infinite growth with something like the donut economics model proposed by Kate Raworth, the pressure to exploit every last resource would ease. We would move toward a steady-state economy where success is measured by human well-being and ecological health, rather than just the velocity of money. We would be looking at the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. Right now, we are crashing through the ceiling and letting billions fall through the floor.
It is a huge shift, though. Most people's retirement funds, the entire banking sector, and the way governments function are predicated on that growth. If we wave the wand, we are essentially saying we have to find a completely new way to value the future. But let's move to number 2. I want to suggest something that feels like a deliberate insult to the consumer. I am talking about planned obsolescence.
That is a perfect candidate for the wand. It is a practice that dates back to the 1920s with the Phoebus cartel, where light bulb manufacturers literally conspired to shorten the lifespan of bulbs from 2,500 hours to 1,000 hours just to increase sales. Today, it is everywhere. Think about the fact that global electronic waste reached 65.3 million tons in 2025. Only 22% of that was formally recycled. The average smartphone still lasts less than 3 years, not because the hardware fails, but because of non-replaceable batteries or software updates that intentionally slow down the device.
It is a design for the landfill. If we eliminate planned obsolescence, we force a transition to a circular economy. Things would be built to be repaired, upgraded, and disassembled. It would change the entire manufacturing sector from a volume-based business to a service-based business. You wouldn't buy a new phone every 2 years. You would have a device that lasts 20 years with occasional module swaps. Imagine the reduction in mining and energy use if we weren't replacing the same billion devices every 36 months.
The technical term for that is decoupling value creation from resource throughput. It is the only way to stay within the land system change and biosphere integrity boundaries. If we are not constantly digging up more minerals to replace things that shouldn't have broken in the first place, we give the planet a chance to breathe. It also restores a sense of dignity to our objects. We become stewards of our tools rather than just temporary users of disposable junk.
Okay, so that is 2. For number 3, I think we have to talk about the $7 trillion in the room. I am talking about fossil fuel subsidies.
That is a massive one, and it is arguably the most irrational practice on the list. The International Monetary Fund update from December 2025 was a massive wake-up call. 7.1% of global gross domestic product is still going towards subsidizing the very thing that is pushing us past those 7 planetary boundaries. In the United States alone, direct subsidies to the fossil fuel industry reached $35 billion last year. That figure has doubled since 2017. We are literally paying for our own extinction.
It is the definition of a perverse incentive. We are essentially paying the industry to accelerate the energy imbalance that the World Meteorological Organization just warned us about. If we wave the wand and those subsidies vanish, the market would finally reflect the true cost of energy. Renewables wouldn't just be competitive, they would be the only logical choice. The invisible hand of the market has been getting a massive, oily handout for a century. If we stop the handouts, the transition to clean energy happens almost overnight because the economics of coal and gas would collapse without their government life support.
And it is not just about the direct cash. It is about the implicit subsidies, like the fact that these companies aren't paying for the health costs of air pollution or the disaster relief costs of climate-related events. Which actually brings me to number 4 on my list, a practice that is often invisible but fundamentally unsustainable from a human condition perspective: modern slavery.
That is a heavy one. Corn, but you are right to include it. The International Labor Organization reports 50 million people in modern slavery as of this year. That is a 25% increase since 2016. 28 million of those are in forced labor, often at the very bottom of the global supply chains that provide our cheap goods, our electronics, and our food.
It is a structural failure of our current version of capitalism. We have globalized the search for low costs, but haven't globalized the protection of human rights. It is inherently unsustainable, because a civilization built on the exploitation of the many for the benefit of the few will eventually face a social collapse. It violates the social foundation of the donut. New regulations like the European Union's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive are finally starting to force companies to audit their supply chains for this, but the wand would go further. It would make it impossible to profit from the theft of human agency.
It would force a massive repricing of almost everything we buy, wouldn't it? If you have to pay a living wage and ensure safe conditions at every step of the chain, that cheap t-shirt doesn't cost $5 anymore. But that is the point of the wand. It reveals the true cost of our lifestyle, which leads perfectly into number 5. The externalization of environmental and social costs.
This is the accounting trick that keeps the whole unsustainable machine running. As we discussed in episode 1497, current corporate accounting treats the destruction of a coral reef or the pollution of a river as an externality. It doesn't show up on the balance sheet. If a company makes $1 billion in profit but causes $2 billion in environmental damage, they are hailed as a success. Their stock goes up. They get bonuses.
It is a collective hallucination. We are counting the income but ignoring the depletion of the capital. If we wave the wand and force impact, weighted accounting, where every company has to subtract their negative impacts from their bottom line, the entire corporate landscape changes overnight. A lot of supposedly profitable companies would suddenly be revealed as bankrupting the planet. They are essentially looting the future to pay for the present.
It would move us from storytelling about sustainability to auditable, mandatory data. This is what the New York Senate was aiming for with Senate Bill 9072A, the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act. They want large corporations to disclose full-scope emissions, including their entire supply chains. If you cannot hide the damage, you are forced to reduce it. The wand would make this accounting universal and inescapable. No more hiding behind Scope 3 complexity.
We are halfway through the list. Let's take a quick look at where we are. We have removed infinite growth, planned obsolescence, fossil fuel subsidies, modern slavery, and cost externalization. That is a lot of systemic weight gone. But what about the technical side of things? I want to bring up something that Daniel mentioned in the prompt context. The AI paradox. Is the energy and water demand of artificial intelligence an inherently unsustainable practice?
This is a nuanced one, and it is a debate currently raging in the industry. If we use artificial intelligence to optimize energy grids and accelerate the discovery of new battery chemistries, it could be a net positive. But the current trend of building larger and larger models without regard for the power consumption of data centers is a massive red flag. In 2026, we are seeing a surge in water usage for cooling these systems that is competing with local agriculture in some regions. If the primary use of artificial intelligence is just to generate more targeted ads to sell more stuff we don't need, then it is just another engine for the infinite growth model.
So maybe the wand doesn't remove artificial intelligence itself, but it removes the unregulated extraction of the resources needed to power it. Let's make that number 6. The unregulated extraction of non-renewable rare earth minerals and the destruction of the planetary commons for mining.
I agree. Whether it is deep-sea mining, which is the new frontier of environmental destruction, or the destruction of biodiversity hotspots for lithium and cobalt, we are treating the Earth like an infinite warehouse. Late last year, we saw a record energy imbalance in the oceans, and now we are talking about scraping the seafloor for minerals, which could disrupt the very carbon cycles that keep the planet habitable. It is a fundamental violation of the biosphere integrity boundary.
If we remove that practice, it forces us back to number 2, the circular economy. We would have to mine our own waste. We have 65 million tons of electronic waste sitting around. If we can't dig up more, we have to get better at recovering what we have already extracted. It turns waste into resource. It forces us to be clever rather than just extractive.
It would also force a shift in how we think about ownership, which leads me to number 7, the private ownership and commodification of critical planetary commons. I am talking about things like water rights, the air we breathe, and the genetic diversity of our food crops.
That is a controversial one, corn. You are basically talking about the end of certain types of privatization that have been standard for centuries.
I am talking about the recognition that some things are essential for the survival of the species and cannot be managed for short-term profit. When a company can buy up the groundwater rights of a community and sell it back to them in plastic bottles while the local wells go dry, that is a practice that violates the social foundation of the donut. It is inherently unsustainable because it creates a scarcity that doesn't need to exist for the sake of shareholder value. It is the tragedy of the commons, but instead of overgrazing, we are over-privatizing.
It reminds me of the debate over the Sustainable Development Goals. Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, recently declared a global development emergency because 18% of those goals are actually in reverse. A lot of that is because we have prioritized private profit over the public good in areas like health, sanitation, and water access. If we wave the wand here, we move toward a model of stewardship rather than ownership. It doesn't mean you can't have private property, but it means you cannot own the life support systems of the planet.
It is about setting a boundary. You can own the house, but you can't own the rain that falls on it. You can own the farm, but you can't own the genetic sequence of the seeds to the point where farmers are sued for saving them.
Okay, number 8. I want to look at something that affects most of the land on Earth: monoculture industrial agriculture.
That is a huge driver of the land system change boundary. We have replaced diverse, resilient ecosystems with thousands of miles of a single crop, usually corn or soy, which requires massive amounts of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Those fertilizers are a major source of nitrogen and phosphorus runoff, which is another planetary boundary we have breached. It leads to dead zones in the ocean and the collapse of pollinator populations.
It is also incredibly fragile. If a single disease hits that one crop, the whole food supply is at risk. It is the opposite of resilience. It is a system designed for efficiency of harvest, not for the health of the soil or the security of the people. If the wand removes monoculture, we are forced back toward regenerative agriculture and polyculture. It is more labor intensive, yes, but it builds soil health, captures carbon, and creates a food system that can actually survive a changing climate.
It also improves the nutrient density of our food. We have been trading quality for quantity for decades. Removing monoculture would be a massive win for both the planet and human health. It would reconnect us to the land in a way that industrial farming has completely severed.
We are getting close to the end. Number 9. I think we have to address the financial markets directly. I am talking about high-frequency trading and the extreme short-termism of capital markets.
This is the high-speed engine of the growth mandate. When CEOs are judged and compensated based on their quarterly earnings reports, they have zero incentive to make decisions that will benefit the company or the planet 20 years from now. They are trapped in a 90-day cycle. High-frequency trading, where algorithms buy and sell stocks in milliseconds to shave off fractions of a cent, has completely decoupled the financial markets from the actual reality of the businesses they are supposed to represent. It is not investing, it is high-speed gambling with the world's resources.
It is a casino built on top of a burning house. If we remove that practice, we force a return to long-term investing. You would only buy a stock if you believed in the company's mission and its ability to flourish over decades. It would align the interests of capital with the interests of a stable civilization. It would slow down the velocity of money to a human pace.
It would also reduce the volatility that often hurts the most vulnerable people in the global economy. This is what people mean when they talk about the move toward impact, weighted profits. It is about making sure the money is actually doing something useful, rather than just generating more money in a digital vacuum.
And finally, number 10, I want to go over something that feels very personal to a lot of people but is undeniably a systemic nightmare: the throwaway fashion and textile cycle, fast fashion.
It is a perfect microexample of everything we have discussed. It relies on modern slavery for labor. It uses massive amounts of water and toxic chemicals, it produces mountains of waste, and it is driven by the constant need for growth. We are producing over 100 billion garments a year, and a huge percentage of them end up in landfills or being burned within 12 months of being made. Some are never even worn.
It is the ultimate expression of the planned obsolescence of culture. We are told that what we bought last month is already obsolete so that we keep the growth engine running. Removing this practice would mean a return to quality, durability, and a genuine personal style that isn't dictated by a weekly refresh cycle at a big box store. It is about valuing the labor and the materials that go into what we wear.
It would also significantly reduce the microplastics in our oceans, as most of these cheap clothes are made from synthetic fibers that shed every time they are washed. It is a win for the biosphere and a win for human dignity.
So there is our list of 10. Let's recap the demolition list. 1. Infinite growth models. 2. Planned obsolescence. 3. Fossil fuel subsidies. 4. Modern slavery. 5. Externalization of environmental and social costs. 6. Unregulated rare earth extraction. 7. Private ownership of planetary commons. 8. Monoculture industrial agriculture. 9. High-frequency trading and financial short-termism. And 10. The fast fashion cycle.
It is a radical list, Herman. If we actually waved that wand, the world would look unrecognizable within a few years. It would be a massive shock to the system. We are talking about the end of cheap as we know it.
That is the big question, isn't it? If we remove these 10 things overnight, would we have a utopia or a total collapse? Because our entire current civilization is built on these very practices. They are the foundations, even if the foundations are rotting. If you pull out the rot all at once, does the house stand?
I think there would be a period of intense chaos, but it would be the chaos of a forest floor after a fire. It is destructive, but it clears the way for new, healthier growth. The problem we have now is that we are trying to keep the fire from happening by pouring more gasoline on it. We are terrified of the transition, so we cling to the unsustainable. We are choosing a slow, agonizing collapse over a sharp, transformative transition.
It is the difference between a controlled demolition and a building falling down on its own. The wand is a controlled demolition. It removes the structural flaws so we can build something better. But in the real world, we don't have a wand. We have regulation, we have cultural shifts, and we have technological innovation. We have to build the new system while the old one is still running.
And we have the shift from voluntary to mandatory. That is the most important thing happening in 2026. We are moving past the era where a company could just put a green leaf on their logo and call it a day. With the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the New York Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, the data is becoming public and auditable. You can't manage what you don't measure. And for the first time, we are starting to measure the right things. We are starting to see the dashboard lights for what they are.
I think the takeaway for our listeners is that they can start doing their own auditing. You don't need a magic wand to look at your own life and your own business through the lens of these 10 practices. Are you contributing to the throwaway cycle? Is your business model predicated on externalizing costs? Are you supporting the companies that are lobbying against transparency? Are you measuring your success by growth alone or by the health of your community?
It is about moving from being a consumer to being a citizen. A consumer just wants the lowest price and the fastest delivery. A citizen asks how that price was achieved and what the long-term cost is to the community and the planet. We have to support the legislation that forces this transparency, like Senate Bill 9072A. We need the data to make better choices. We need to turn the S in ESG from a marketing slogan into a mandatory audit.
I also think it is worth looking at the donut economics framework. It is a great tool for visualizing this. You want to stay within the ecological ceiling, those 9 planetary boundaries, while ensuring that everyone has the social foundation they need, like food, water, energy, and a voice. If a practice pushes us through the ceiling or lets someone fall through the floor, it is unsustainable. Period.
The framework is a perfect guide for how to use the metaphor of the wand in our own lives. We have to be honest about the trade-offs. If we want to end modern slavery, we have to be willing to pay more for our goods. If we want to end fossil fuel subsidies, we have to be willing to transition our energy systems and perhaps change our travel habits. Sustainability isn't a win-win where everything stays the same but gets greener. It is a fundamental redesign.
It is a design problem, not just a moral one. We have designed a system that rewards the wrong things: speed, volume, and extraction. Now we have to redesign it to reward the things that actually matter for long-term survival: durability, resilience, and equity. The World Meteorological Organization report is a reminder that the clock is ticking. We don't have another 11 years to figure this out. The energy imbalance in the oceans is a debt that will be collected.
The record imbalance is the planet's way of telling us that the bill is coming due. We can either pay it now through a structured transition, or we can wait for the system to fail on its own terms. I would much rather use the wand, even if it is just a metaphorical one made of policy, public will, and hard data.
I am still thinking about that smartphone lifespan. If I could keep my phone for 20 years, I would save so much time not having to transfer all my photos and settings every 2 years. That alone is worth the wand. Think of the collective human hours saved from not having to set up new devices.
You are always thinking about the nap time you could gain, Herman. But you are right. A world where things are built to last is a world that respects both the resources of the planet and the time of the people living on it. It is a more dignified, less frantic way to live.
It is a slower way to live, too. Maybe that is why I like it. As a sloth, I am naturally aligned with a steady-state economy. No need for infinite growth when you can just find a good branch and stay there for a while.
As long as the branch is part of a healthy, diverse forest and not a monoculture plantation that is about to be clear-cut for a quarterly earnings report.
Point taken. Well, this has been a deep one. Daniel really pushed us with this thought experiment. It is a good reminder that the weird in our prompts often leads to the most important questions about how we are living and what we are willing to change.
It certainly does. It is easy to get lost in the day-to-day noise of the news, but when you step back and look at the structural dead ends, the path forward becomes much clearer. It is not necessarily easy, but it is clear. We know what needs to go. The question is whether we have the courage to wave the wand.
We should probably wrap this up before I start trying to build a modular smartphone out of old light bulbs and recycled donkey hair in my backyard.
I would stick to the sloth-approved nap for now, Herman. Let the engineers handle the modularity.
Sound advice as always. Corn Poppleberry. Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the wheels on this show while we try to reinvent civilization.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the research and generation behind our discussions. We couldn't dive this deep into the data without that support.
This has been my Weird Props. If you are finding these deep dives useful, leaving a review on your favorite podcast app is a huge help. It tells the algorithms that people actually care about substantive discussions rather than just clickbait.
You can also find our full archive and all the ways to subscribe at myweirdprompts.com. We have over 1,400 episodes there, covering everything from battery chemistry to the ethics of artificial intelligence.
Check out episode 852 or 1497 if you want to go deeper on the economic and accounting shifts we talked about today. They provide the technical backbone for a lot of what we discussed.
We will be back soon with another prompt from Daniel. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning the normal.
And maybe keep an eye on those planetary boundaries. See you next time.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth